When did you find out that your perfect marriage was everyone else's nightmare? I thought Damien and I were the golden couple. Married at 23, matching his rising ambition with my artistic dreams. He supported my gallery showings while I managed his demanding legal career. Our social media was picture perfect. Weekend getaways to wine country, candlelit anniversary dinners, and endless hashtags about trans relationship goals. Everyone constantly told us how lucky we were. The first crack appeared at my college reunion. My former roommate Alex pulled me aside during the cocktail hour, her expression uncharacteristically serious. "How are you really doing?" she asked, studying my face with deep concern. "Amazing," I replied automatically. "Damien just made partner at his firm, and my latest collection is selling faster than—" "No," she interrupted firmly. "How are you really doing?" Something in her tone made my stomach twist violently. "What do you mean?" "The way he corrected you 3 times at dinner, how he ordered your meal without asking what you wanted, how you immediately apologized when he spilled red wine on your white dress." I laughed it off nervously. He knows what I like better than I do. We're that connected. But her words followed me home like shadows. That week, I started noticing everything differently. How Damien would squeeze my hand painfully tight when I spoke to other men. How he'd finish my sentences at parties, usually incorrectly. How I'd gradually stopped wearing bright colors because he preferred me in muted neutrals. "It makes you look more sophisticated," he'd always say. During my sister's birthday dinner, I excused myself to the restroom. Standing in the narrow hallway, I overheard my entire family talking in hushed, worried tones. "She's completely lost herself," Mom whispered sadly. "Remember how vibrant and outspoken she used to be?" Dad added with frustration. "Now she barely speaks unless he gives approval." My uncle's voice cut deepest. "That controlling man has systematically isolated her from everyone who truly cares about her well-being." I stood frozen, hand trembling on the door handle. "She won't listen if we try to say anything directly," my sister said with resignation. "She's so deeply manipulated. She genuinely thinks this is what healthy love looks like." When I returned to the table, Damien was confidently explaining to my family why I'd completely stopped painting abstract pieces. "Realistic portraits are infinitely more marketable," he declared, not even noticing my return. "I've been strategically helping her focus her artistic career in profitable directions." I hadn't painted a single abstract piece in nearly 2 years. I'd completely forgotten that experimental art used to bring me pure joy. That night, I scrolled through my phone with growing horror. Text threads with old friends had dwindled to absolute nothing. My artwork had become safe, commercial, utterly forgettable. My calendar was filled exclusively with his work events, his preferred restaurants, his carefully chosen social circle. I found an old video from before our marriage. I was laughing freely, completely paint-splattered, dancing wildly in my cluttered studio, to music Damien always called pretentious noise. I looked like an entirely different human being. The next morning, while Damien showered, I called Alex with shaking hands. "I think I desperately need help," I whispered. "Thank God," she breathed with relief. "I've been waiting 3 agonizing years for this exact call." "How long has everyone actually known?" "Since your engagement party, when you transformed your entire personality overnight to match his expectations." That afternoon, I discovered something in his laptop that made my blood turn to ice. A folder labeled Project Wife contained hundreds of documents, spreadsheets tracking my daily routines, my emotional responses to different situations, my menstrual cycle, screenshots of every social media interaction I'd had, a detailed psychological profile analyzing my weaknesses and pressure points. But the worst part was a series of emails to someone named Dr. Harrison. "Subject is responding well to isolation protocols," one read. "Have successfully redirected her artistic output toward more manageable commercial work. Social connections reduced by 87% over past 18 months. Another, recommend increasing financial dependency. Will begin handling all banking to limit her autonomy further." The most recent one made me vomit into my coffee mug. "Ready to begin pregnancy phase. Subject is sufficiently conditioned. Will discontinue her birth control without knowledge within next cycle." My hands shook so violently I could barely scroll through the rest. There were photos of me sleeping, showering, getting dressed, video files with timestamps showing me in our home when I thought I was alone, audio recordings of phone calls with my family, my remaining friends, even my gynecologist. I found a detailed timeline mapping out the next 5 years of my life, where we'd live, how many children I'd have, what type of art I'd be allowed to create. There was even a budget for my allowable personal expenses, $200 per month. In the very last folder, I discovered correspondence with a private investigator. Damien had been collecting dirt on everyone in my life, my parents' financial troubles, my sister's past addiction issues, my friends' personal scandals. He had enough information to destroy anyone who might try to help me leave. I heard the shower turn off upstairs. My entire life had been an elaborate psychological experiment. I wasn't his wife. I was his test subject. I grabbed my phone and started photographing everything with trembling fingers. Screen after screen of evidence documenting 3 years of systematic manipulation and surveillance. The shower stopped running. I heard his footsteps on the bathroom tiles. I slammed the laptop shut and ran to the kitchen, my heart hammering so hard I thought it might burst. When Damien came downstairs in his crisp business suit, I was standing at the stove making his usual breakfast. Scrambled eggs, wheat toast, black coffee. "Good morning, beautiful," he said, kissing my cheek. His lips felt like ice against my skin. "Morning," I managed, my voice somehow steady despite the panic screaming in my head. He sat at the table and opened his phone, scrolling through emails while I served his breakfast. I watched him eat the food I'd prepared, the same man who'd been documenting every detail of my existence like I was a lab rat. "I have to work late tonight," he said without looking up. "The Morrison case needs attention." "Of course," I replied automatically. "I'll keep dinner warm." After he left for work, I called Alex immediately. "I need to see you right now," I said. "And bring that friend of yours who works in cybersecurity." 2 hours later, I sat in Alex's living room with her friend Maya, showing them the photos I'd taken. Maya's expression grew darker with each image. "This is beyond controlling," Maya said grimly. "This is criminal surveillance. The level of documentation here suggests obsessive-compulsive stalking behaviors." "What do I do?" I asked. "He has information that could ruin my entire family." Alex grabbed my hands. "First we get you somewhere safe. Then we figure out how to destroy him legally. I can't just disappear. He tracks everything. My phone, my car, probably my clothes." Maya nodded. "We'll need to be smart about this. Create a plan that he won't see coming." For the next 4 hours, we developed what Maya called an extraction strategy. I would continue acting normal while secretly gathering evidence and preparing to leave. Maya would help me establish new accounts he couldn't access. Alex would coordinate with my family to get them ready for potential retaliation. Most importantly, Maya emphasized, "You cannot let him know you've discovered any of this. Men like Damien become dangerous when they lose control." That evening, I performed the role of perfect wife with Academy Award precision. I asked about his day, served his favorite meal, and listened to him explain why my latest painting needed minor adjustments to be more commercially viable. "The colors are too bold," he said, studying my canvas with disapproving eyes. "Potential buyers prefer subtle palettes." I nodded and smiled, all while mentally cataloging every manipulation tactic he used, how he framed his criticism as helpful guidance, how he positioned himself as the expert on my own artistic vision, how he made me feel grateful for his suggestions. Over the following weeks, I became a double agent in my own marriage. During the day, while Damien worked, I systematically gathered evidence with Maya's help. We discovered he'd installed spyware on my phone and tracking devices in my car. Hidden cameras were placed throughout our home, everywhere except his office, which required a fingerprint scanner to enter. Maya taught me how to use encrypted communication apps and helped me open a new bank account using my maiden name. Alex coordinated with my family, warning them about the surveillance and the potential for Damien to use their personal information against them. "He's been planning this for years," my dad said when we met secretly at a restaurant across town. "Even before you were married, he was gathering information about our family." "Why?" I asked, though I already suspected the answer. "Control," Mom replied, her voice filled with disgust. "He needed leverage to keep you isolated and compliant." My sister revealed that Damien had approached her 2 years earlier, claiming concern about my mental health and asking detailed questions about my childhood, my insecurities, my fears. "I thought he was being a caring husband," she said with tears in her eyes. "I told him everything, about your anxiety issues, your perfectionism, your fear of abandonment after Dad's accident. I realized he'd used every piece of personal information against me. When I'd expressed anxiety about social situations, he'd gradually stopped including me in plans with other people. When I'd mentioned feeling insecure about my art, he'd systematically undermined my confidence while positioning himself as my supporter." The most chilling discovery came when Maya managed to access his email server. We found correspondence dating back 5 years, 2 years before we'd even met. "Look at this," Maya said, pointing to an email thread with Dr. E. Harrison from before our first date. "Target identified," one message read. "Subject fits profile perfectly. Artistic, empathetic, family-oriented. Recent trauma makes her vulnerable to savior complex manipulation." Dr. Harrison's response was clinical. "Excellent choice. Her personality type responds well to gradual control strategies. Recommend initial love-bombing phase followed by systematic isolation." I had been selected like a victim in a crime drama. "Who is Dr. Harrison?" I asked. Maya's research revealed the horrifying truth. Dr. Marcus Harrison was a disgraced psychologist who'd lost his license for conducting unauthorized experiments on patients. He now worked privately, helping wealthy men manipulate and control their partners using psychological techniques. Damien paid him $50,000 for a complete behavioral modification plan, Maya explained. "You weren't his wife. You were his thesis project." The plan we discovered in his files wasn't just about controlling my current life. It was about completely erasing my identity and rebuilding me as his ideal companion. The pregnancy timeline wasn't about starting a family. It was about creating permanent biological ties that would make leaving impossible. That night, I lay awake next to my husband, watching him sleep peacefully while my mind raced with escape plans. This man had stolen 3 years of my life, isolated me from everyone I loved, and turned me into a stranger to myself. But he'd made one crucial mistake. He'd underestimated me. The next morning, while Damien showered, I implemented the first phase of my counterattack. Using Maya's instructions, I carefully installed monitoring software on his laptop, the same type of spyware he'd used on my devices. If he could document my life, I could document his crimes. I also planted tiny recording devices throughout the house, focusing on his office where he felt most secure. Maya had provided me with equipment so small it looked like dust particles. Every conversation he had, every phone call he made, every meeting with his collaborators would be recorded. Over the next 2 weeks, I gathered enough evidence to fill a small warehouse. Recorded conversations between Damien and Dr. Harrison discussing phase 3 of my conditioning. Audio of Damien bragging to colleagues about his perfectly trained wife. Video footage of him going through my personal belongings, photographing my journal entries and private letters. But the smoking gun came when I recorded him meeting with a private investigator to discuss expanding surveillance, to include my family's daily routines. I need to know exactly when they're vulnerable, Damien said in the recording. If my wife ever tries to leave, I'll need immediate leverage. The investigator's response chilled me to the bone. We can arrange accidents if necessary. Make it look natural. I was married to a sociopath who was planning to hurt my family if I ever tried to escape. That night, I met Maya and Alex at a 24-hour diner on the other side of the city. I showed them the recordings on my phone, watching their faces grow pale with horror. This is enough to put him in prison for decades, Maya said. Stalking, surveillance, conspiracy, possibly attempted murder. But first, we need to get you out safely, Alex added. And we need to protect your family. We spent hours planning what Maya called Operation Liberation. It would happen in 3 phases. Phase 1, secure my safety and gather final evidence. Phase 2, involve law enforcement and legal authorities. Phase 3, ensure Damien could never hurt me or my family again. The key is timing, Maya explained. We need to move fast once we start. Men like Damien become extremely dangerous when their control is threatened. Phase 1 began the following Monday. While Damien attended a legal conference in another city, I systematically documented everything in our home. Maya helped me photograph every hidden camera, every tracking device, every piece of surveillance equipment he'd installed. We found 47 cameras throughout the house. 47. In our bedroom, bathroom, closets, even inside my art studio. For 3 years, I'd had zero privacy in my own home. In his office safe, which Maya's locksmith friend opened in under 5 minutes, we discovered the most damning evidence yet. Detailed psychological profiles of 12 other women, all with similar backgrounds to mine. Photos, personal information, behavioral analysis, manipulation strategies. He's done this before, I whispered, staring at photos of women who looked hauntingly similar to me, multiple times. Maya found correspondence indicating that Dr. Harrison ran an underground network of wealthy men who paid for custom wife conditioning services. Damien wasn't just my abuser. He was part of an organized operation targeting vulnerable women. Some of these women are listed as deceased, Maya said, her voice shaking. Car accidents, suicides, mysterious illnesses. The room spun around me. I wasn't just married to a controlling man. I was married to someone involved in what appeared to be systematic murder. That evening, when Damien returned from his conference, I performed my role flawlessly. I asked about his trip, served his favorite dinner, and listened to his stories about networking with other attorneys, all while wearing a wire and knowing that every word was being recorded for evidence. I missed you, he said, stroking my cheek with the same hands that had documented my every movement for years. I missed you too, I replied, my stomach churning with revulsion. Phase 2 began the next morning. Maya's contact at the FBI was Agent Rodriguez, a specialist in domestic terrorism and organized stalking cases. When we showed her our evidence, her reaction was immediate and intense. This is one of the most sophisticated domestic surveillance operations I've ever seen, she said after reviewing the files. And if these other women were actually murdered, we're looking at a potential serial killing network. What happens now? I asked. Now we build an airtight case while keeping you alive, Agent Rodriguez replied grimly. Your husband and his associates can never know we're investigating until we're ready to make arrests. For the next month, I lived a double life that would have made CIA operatives proud. During the day, I continued playing the perfect wife role while secretly working with federal investigators. Agents monitored our home from unmarked vehicles. My every interaction with Damien was recorded and analyzed by behavioral experts. He's escalating, Agent Rodriguez warned me after reviewing the latest surveillance footage. His control behaviors are intensifying. We think he's preparing to move to what Dr. Harrison calls Phase 4. What's Phase 4? I asked, though I dreaded the answer. Based on the patterns with other victims, we believe Phase 4 involves complete isolation, moving you to a remote location where you'd have zero contact with the outside world. The investigation moved quickly once federal resources were involved. Within 3 weeks, they'd identified 7 other victims of the network. 4 were still alive, but living in conditions that could only be described as captivity. 3 were dead under suspicious circumstances. Dr. Harrison was arrested first, during a raid on his private practice. His files contained detailed records of over 50 conditioning projects spanning 15 years. The FBI discovered that wealthy men paid between $75,000 and $200,000 for complete wife modification services. Your husband was one of their premium clients, Agent Rodriguez explained. He paid for the most intensive package available. The evidence against Damien was overwhelming. In addition to everything I'd gathered, federal investigators found financial records, communication logs, and video evidence of his involvement in the network. But they needed to arrest him carefully to avoid alerting other participants who might flee or destroy evidence. The night before Damien's arrest, I lay awake beside him, knowing it would be the last time I'd ever have to pretend to be his perfect wife. Tomorrow, my 3-year nightmare would finally end. I thought about the woman I'd been before meeting him, confident, artistic, surrounded by people who loved me for exactly who I was. I thought about the woman I'd become, anxious, isolated, constantly seeking approval from someone who viewed me as a psychological experiment. But mostly, I thought about the woman I was going to become once I was free. The arrests happened simultaneously at 6 a.m. on a Tuesday morning. Federal agents surrounded our house while Damien was still sleeping. Other teams raided Dr. Harrison's associates and the remaining network participants across 3 states. I was already awake, having barely slept from anticipation. When I heard the agents at our door, I gently shook Damien's shoulder. Someone's here, I said softly. He sat up, confused and disoriented. Through our bedroom window, we could see unmarked vehicles filling our driveway. "What the hell?" he muttered, reaching for his phone. The phone rang immediately. Agent Rodriguez's voice was calm and professional. "Mr. Damian Walsh, this is the FBI. Please exit your residence with your hands visible. Do not attempt to access any electronic devices." Damian's face went through a rapid series of expressions: confusion, realization, fear, and finally, cold calculation. He turned to look at me, and for the first time in 3 years, I saw him without his mask of concern and affection. "You clever little bitch," he said quietly. "How long have you known?" "Long enough," I replied, no longer bothering to hide my disgust. He moved toward his phone, probably to warn his associates. But I was ready for that too. "I wouldn't," I said. "Every device in this house has been monitored for weeks. Every call you've made, every text you've sent, every email, it's all evidence now." The look he gave me was pure hatred. This was the real Damian, the one who'd viewed me as nothing more than a psychology experiment to be manipulated and controlled. "You have no idea what you've done," he hissed. "The people I work with don't forgive betrayal." "Neither do I replied. Federal agents entered our bedroom moments later, placing Damian in handcuffs while reading him his rights. As they led him away, he turned back to me one last time. "This isn't over," he said. "You'll never be safe." "Actually," Agent Rodriguez said, appearing beside me, "it is over. Your entire network has been dismantled. 37 arrests across 12 states. Your threats won't help you where you're going." After Damian was taken away, I stood in our bedroom, my prison for 3 years, and felt something I hadn't experienced in so long I'd forgotten what it was like: freedom. The legal proceedings took 18 months. Damian and Dr. Harrison were both sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The other network participants received sentences ranging from 15 to 40 years. The FBI's investigation led to additional arrests in other countries, dismantling what authorities called the largest organized domestic abuse network in recorded history. I testified at several trials, describing my experience as both victim and witness. It was terrifying and empowering at the same time. For the first time in years, I was telling my own story in my own words. The media attention was intense, but ultimately helpful. My story inspired other victims to come forward, leading to additional arrests and rescues. I started receiving letters from women around the world who'd recognized similar patterns in their own relationships. During the trials, I learned the full scope of what had been done to me. Dr. Harrison's psychological profile contained detailed analysis of my personality, my vulnerabilities, and my likely responses to different manipulation tactics. Damian had studied me like a scientist studies a specimen, but I also learned something else. I was stronger than any of them had anticipated. "Subject shows unexpected resilience," read one of Dr. Harrison's later reports. "Conditioning protocols are less effective than predicted. Recommend escalating control measures." Even while being systematically manipulated, some part of me had resisted. Some core of who I was had refused to be completely erased. 6 months after Damian's conviction, I opened my first art exhibition in 4 years. The collection was called Reclaim, abstract pieces that blazed with color and emotion. For the first time since before my marriage, I painted exactly what I felt, exactly how I wanted to express it. Alex stood beside me at the opening, watching people engage with my work. "You're back," she said simply. "No," I replied, studying a canvas that seemed to glow with purple and gold defiance. "I'm someone new, someone better." My family was there too, surrounding me with the love and support I'd almost forgotten existed. My sister brought her new boyfriend. My parents held hands like teenagers, and my uncle kept wiping away proud tears. "We never stopped hoping," Mom said, hugging me tightly. "Even when you seemed completely lost, we knew you were still in there somewhere." The exhibition sold out in 3 hours. But more importantly, I felt like myself again. Not the person I'd been before Damian, but someone stronger, more aware, more appreciative of genuine love and freedom. Maya attended the opening with her girlfriend, both of them beaming with pride. Without Maya's technical expertise and Alex's unwavering friendship, I might never have escaped. They'd risked their own safety to help me reclaim my life. "What's next?" Maya asked as we watched people admire my paintings. "Everything," I replied. "Everything I want, exactly how I want it." 2 years later, I've built a life that's entirely my own. I live in a bright studio apartment filled with plants and canvases, and music Damian would have called pretentious noise. My walls are covered with abstract paintings that burst with color and emotion. My calendar is filled with people I genuinely want to see and activities that bring me joy. I work part-time as a victim advocate, helping other women recognize and escape manipulative relationships. The FBI consults with me occasionally when they encounter similar cases. My experience as both victim and investigator gives me unique insight into how these networks operate. I'm in therapy, processing the trauma and learning to trust my own instincts again. Some days are harder than others. I still check locks multiple times and feel uncomfortable when people ask too many personal questions. But I'm healing, slowly and steadily. I date occasionally, but carefully. I know the warning signs now. The subtle ways controllers test boundaries and begin their manipulation. Love bombing, isolation tactics, financial control, emotional manipulation. I can spot them all from miles away. My art continues to evolve. The abstract pieces I create now are different from my pre-Damian work. Deeper, more complex, informed by survival and recovery. Several museums have expressed interest in acquiring pieces from my reclaimed series. Alex remains my closest friend, though I've also reconnected with people from before my marriage. It's strange how quickly genuine friendships can be restored once the toxic influence is removed. People who'd watched me disappear into Damien's world welcomed me back with open arms. My family and I are closer than ever. We've all learned not to take love and freedom for granted. Sunday dinners at my parents' house are loud, chaotic, beautiful affairs where everyone talks over each other and argues about politics and hugs too long when saying goodbye. Last month, I received a letter from one of the other victims of the network. She'd been held captive for 7 years before our investigation led to her rescue. She's now in graduate school studying psychology, planning to specialize in trauma recovery. "You saved my life," she wrote. "But more than that, you showed me that even after everything they take from us, we can still fight back. We can still reclaim ourselves." I keep that letter on my easel as I paint. A reminder that survival isn't just about escaping abuse, it's about choosing to thrive afterward. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if Alex hadn't spoken up at my college reunion, if my family hadn't continued loving me despite my transformation, if Maya hadn't agreed to help a stranger escape a dangerous situation, if federal agents hadn't taken our evidence seriously. I might still be trapped in that perfect-looking marriage, slowly disappearing into someone else's vision of who I should be, or worse, I might have become another mysterious death in Dr. Harrison's files. But I didn't disappear. I fought back. And in fighting back, I discovered something Damien and his psychological experts had never anticipated. Some people can't be broken, no matter how sophisticated the manipulation. The woman who was selected as an ideal victim became the one who brought down their entire operation. I think about that sometimes when I'm painting in my sun-filled studio, music playing as loud as I want, wearing whatever colors make me happy. I think about how they studied my personality and calculated my responses and planned my future down to the smallest detail. They never could have predicted that I'd become the one to destroy them all. Now, when people tell me how brave I was to escape and testify and rebuild my life, I always correct them. I wasn't brave, I was desperate. Desperation gave me clarity. Clarity gave me strength. And strength, it turned out, was something I'd always had. Damien tried to erase it, study it, control it, redirect it, but he couldn't destroy it. Some things I've learned are unbreakable. My life now is nothing like the one Damien planned for me in his detailed timelines and psychological profiles. I'm not the subdued, isolated, commercially focused artist he was conditioning me to become. I'm loud and messy and experimental and free. I paint abstract pieces that sell to collectors who appreciate boldness over marketability. I travel alone to places that inspire me. I maintain friendships based on genuine connection rather than strategic networking. I make decisions based on what feels right rather than what someone else wants. When I look in the mirror now, I see the woman from that old video, paint splattered and dancing and completely herself. But I also see someone new, someone who's been tested and survived, someone who knows the difference between love and control, someone who will never again mistake manipulation for devotion. 3 years ago, I thought I was living the perfect marriage. I believed I was lucky to have found someone who cared so much about improving me, guiding me, helping me become my best self. I had no idea that everyone who truly loved me was watching in horror as I disappeared before their eyes. I had no idea that my perfect husband viewed me as a psychological experiment rather than a human being. I had no idea that I was strong enough to fight back, but I found out. And in finding out, I discovered something more valuable than any perfect marriage could ever be. The unshakable knowledge that I am enough, exactly as I am, without anyone's improvements or modifications or careful conditioning. I am enough. I always was. And no one, no matter how sophisticated their psychological manipulation or how detailed their behavioral modification plans, can ever take that away from me again. That's the real ending to my story. Not the dramatic rescue or the legal victory or the artistic success. The real ending is much simpler. I remembered who I was underneath all their careful conditioning. And once I remembered, no force on earth could make me forget again. The woman who thought she was living the perfect marriage discovered that the most perfect thing of all is being perfectly, authentically, unapologetically yourself. Even if, especially if, someone else spent years trying to convince you that yourself wasn't good enough. It turns out I was always exactly good enough. I just needed to remember.